Thank you for joining us and welcome to our webinar entitled Screen Printing, Prepress, Mesh, and Stencil, Part 1 of 3, featuring Rob Nielson from Regional Supply and John Bejar from Chromaline. This first in a three-part series of screen printing webinars will focus on best-in-class prepress practices for screen printing. Rob Nielson is the longest tenured employee at Regional Supply. Since 1978, he has built an impressive resume, working almost every position within the company. For the past 20 years, he has worked as the resident expert on screen printing and is trained and certified through Chromaline. John Bejar has worked in the screen print industry for the past 40 years and the last 7 with Chromaline. Chromaline screen print products has evolved to take advantage of an ever-changing competitive environment. Chromaline continually invests in the research and development of new products and technology. Additionally, Chromaline continually seeks out technological leaders in order to leverage its own position as a market leader.
Hello everyone, I'm Rob Nielson. We've got John Bejar here, so we'll get started here. First thing we're going to talk about is why mesh is so important to your end result, and we'll have John talk a bit about mesh and the different diameters of microns.
Years ago, when screen printing was just at its novelty, when you would order a mesh count, there was only one mesh, like a 110 or 230, 150. Today, years later, they make very different variables in the mesh counts. 230 comes in 2 different thread diameters, 150 comes in 2 different thread diameters, and so on. And this is important because each thread diameter will give you a certain ink deposit that you're looking for, and some will maintain fine detail better than other thread diameters. What you're looking at here is 230 mesh in 3 different thread diameters. You've got a 40 micron thread diameter, 45, and 48. If you look down the bottom, it'll say 41% open area, 35% open area, and 33% open area. All 3 being 230 mesh. If you choose one today, unaware of what thread diameter it is, if you decided to use that 230 again and not sure of the thread diameter, it's going to give you 2 different results. In the color, in the strength of the density you're looking for. Also, when it comes to coating that screen with emulsion, you'll get 2 different exposure times or 3 different exposure times, depending on which particular thread you're looking at or using. So when you do buy mesh, you specify what thread diameter. And what we're showing here on this diagram is the difference between a yellow mesh and a white mesh. You see that the yellow mesh light penetrate all the way through, and when it gets to the white mesh, the light scatters. Because of this reasoning, when you want to do fine line detail, you would use the yellow mesh over the white mesh.
Okay, we'll go on to a video showing about capillary film and how to install the sheets onto a screen.
Hi, my name is Mick Orr. I'm the Applications Training Specialist here at Chromaline. What I'm going to show you are 2 different ways of applying capillary film. And the capillary film I'll be using today will be our ProCap 50. The first method is known as a roll-down method. I'll be taking this film and applying it to this screen. Let's go into the washout area and apply this film. All right, now the first step we have to do is we have to degrease this screen, because as clean as it looks, it is very dirty. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to grab my Chromaline and a hose. Wet the screen. Squirt on a little bit of Chromaline, not very much. Use a brush just for degreasing, and work this into a lather. Then I have to do the other side. There, I have now removed almost all the oils and whatever's on the screen, and I rinse it off. You have to do both sides. Make sure you get it all off. Okay, it's now degreased. The next step is you have to put on a wetting agent. What this wetting agent does, it actually makes the screen wetter. It keeps water on the screen longer, giving you enough time to apply the capillary film. So we just put a little bit of this on. And the difference here is, again, you're going to use a different brush, but the big difference is you just spread it out onto the screen. You don't work it into a lather like the Chromaline. Spread it out, do both sides, set that aside, and literally rinse it off. Okay, I now have a nice wet screen. I don't know if you can see that, but you can see a lot of water on there. That's what you want. Now, believe it or not, one of the really important things here is you must have a dry hand. If your hands aren't dry, you're going to have a devil of a time putting this capillary film on. So I'm just drying my hands. And I'm going to grab my capillary film, which is right here. And what you want to do is roll it emulsion side out on itself. If your hands are wet, you could not do this. You see how tight I'm getting that? Okay. Now the wetting agent has kept the water in place. I touch it to the top, hold it there just for a second, roll it down. Then with a regular window squeegee, turn the screen over, squeegee it off. It is now ready to go into the other room where you dry it. Okay, now that we applied the roll down method, the next method is known as the spray gun method. I'm going to take this film and apply it to this screen using a spray gun. This is a typical spray gun you'd have if you were painting a car. What's important, number one, is you just have water in this canister and it be set between 30 and 40 pounds of air pressure. Now the first step is to put what's known as a light tack coat on the screen. You notice I have this screen facing print side out. I'll put a light tack coat on, set this gun down for a second, take my film, which I already cut, turn it over, and you can see it's barely in place. Matter of fact, I could pull it off right now if I wanted to. See that? This tack coat is just holding it in place. Now, what I do is with this spray gun, now I apply on the print or squeegee side. Until I get a nice gloss. It's almost like a mirror image right now. I'll set this aside. Take a window squeegee. All right, this is now ready to be dried. I'll put it in my drying cabinet. Once it's dry, I expose it. That's all there is to it. All right, now that I've got this applied, I have to dry it. I'm going to dry it in this cabinet. And the cabinet's set for 110 degrees Fahrenheit. It should be dry in about a half an hour to an hour. At that point, then I'm going to check the screen. Okay, let's see if it's dry. Now, capillary film will let you know when it's ready to go. What you do is you just pick at the corner. Hear that noise? It means capillary film is not ready. That means put it back and dry it a little bit longer. Once the screen is dry, that film will remove nice and easy with no noise. When that happens, now you're ready to expose the screen. Now that the screen's dry, next thing is mount your positive on your screen and expose it. So I'll just put it in the exposure unit, set my time. We got 180 units, and I'm going to close it down. Okay, it's now exposed. Vacuum's gone. Open it up. Remove my positive. and bring this into the washout area and develop it out. Okay, I'm ready to go. Wet the screen down. Now you can wait 30 seconds to a minute to wash this out, but I like to wash it out right away. While this is developing, it's a good idea if you have a washout sink, make sure you have some good ventilation. It's always good to have good air with you. Other thing I'd like you to notice is I'm doing most of my washout on the print side of the screen. Capillary film, being it's only on one side of the screen, wash out on the print side most of the time. However, you can do a little bit of a rinse job on the squeegee side. Now the important thing is rinse the squeegee side off. That's it. Now you're ready to dry it and then print.
Well, let's kind of recap what we did here on this, and then we'll go into what the difference is between capillary film and direct emulsion. But some of the important features that Mick talked about is making sure your screen is clean, which means be degreased, any kind of dust particles, dirt particles, any oil residue. New screens do have oil on the mesh, so we do need to make sure they're clean. Using a good degreaser is a way to do that. Rinse it out completely and make sure the screen is completely clean before applying the film. And then when we move on from there, I mean, you've seen that the two different methods, one using a roll down method with water, where he used an agent called Chroma Wet. That is one way it can be done, but to do that, you do need to make sure the screen is really nice and wet. You'll do that roll down method. The other method they did show was using a spray gun. And I've showed a lot of people that you can use a squirt bottle, a mist bottle, and get kind of the same results. You end up putting a little bit more water on there, and it's harder to remove the film and reposition it by having that extra water on the screen. But it works just as well using a squeegee. Make sure you do remove all the excess water from both sides. Make sure the screen, when being dried, is dried with the print side up or the emulsion side facing up. And then we'll let John here talk about a little difference between capillary film and direct emulsion.
Basically, the difference between the capillary film and direct emulsion. The capillary film, you have, the main thing is simplicity. The simplicity, consistency, easy of application, and it's faster. Direct emulsion, it's a little bit more difficult to coat. It's designed for longer runs. Cost is a variable that it could cost you more money by using direct emulsion than the film, depending on the size of the run. Time consuming and wasteful. Every time you remove emulsion from your trough, you are throwing product down the waste, and so that does cost money as well. So two completely different animals or products, I would say.
Okay, also when he was talking about doing this film, he was talking about a ProCap 50. There is different thicknesses of film, and that is used, the reason being is for larger deposits or more deposit of ink or a thicker coat of ink. There's films ranging all the way down to this 18 micron as high as 700 micron. The standard textile application uses between a 30 to 50. Our basic one is a 38, a ProCap 38. So we will go forward and show a direct emulsion application and move on from there.
Hi, I'm Mick Orr, Applications Training Specialist here at Chromaline. Today what I'd like to do is show you how to mix a diazo-based emulsion. Today I'm going to be mixing up UDC HV, which is a dual curie emulsion. Let's just look in the box. First thing you'll notice when you open it, you have this little small bottle. This bottle is actually a diazo. It's very light sensitive, and that's why, again, we're working under yellow lights. And this is the emulsion. Now this emulsion UDC HV won't do anything until you add the diazo to it. Now I've already mixed this material up, so I'll show you what to do. First of all, I've added water to this diazo bottle. I've added water up to the shoulder, put the lid on real tight, put a rag over this and shook it. And you want to shake it for at least 2 to 3 minutes to make sure the powder gets totally dissolved. Because if it doesn't get totally dissolved, you're not going to get it into the emulsion. Take the lid off. And pour the emulsion in. Look inside to make sure there's nothing hanging on the side walls, that you got all the emulsion. Put that back on. And now you'd use a wooden paddle or maybe a stainless steel paddle, and you want to mix the emulsion up. And you want to mix this very well. Get rid of all the swirls that you may see in the emulsion, whatever. Just make sure it's a uniform color by the time you're done. And this can take a little while, but it's important to do a good job at this. Once it is totally mixed up, the next step is to put the lid on it. I already have another container already mixed, and I'll show you what I do with that now. Just set this aside. Once this material has been mixed up, put the lid back on. Get yourself a pen, because that's important. And what you want to do is you literally want to write the date right on it, which would be today's date. And the reason you want to do that is because it has a shelf life of 4 to 6 weeks. After 4 to 6 weeks, this material probably won't work too well. So it's important you put the date on there so you know when you mixed it up. Set this aside for 1 to 2 hours to let it degas, and you're ready to go. Now you can coat your screen. That is how you mix up a diazo-based emulsion. And it's the same for all diazo-based emulsions, whether it's straight diazo or a dual pure emulsion. Thank you.
Okay, let's kind of recap about the liquid emulsion. A couple of the differences were we have to make sure the screen is dried completely before applying the emulsion, where when using a capillary film, the screen can be wet, so you can come straight from the greasing room straight to the application room. You notice that he had done a 1-in-1 and then also a 1-in-2 coat. And the reason for that is to get a more emulsion down to give us the thickness like a capillary film, where we've gone from a 25 micron to a 38 micron and so on. Most people do print or do a 1-in-1 coating, and always finish on the squeegee side, making sure the screen is put into your dry rack with the print side down, squeegee side up. So we will go forward into the accepted light sources.
I wanted to mention that most coaters have 2 edges. There's a sharp edge and a round edge. What determines what edge to use, if you're using a high solid emulsion, you want to use your sharp edge. And if it's a low solid emulsion, you want to use a round edge.
Hi, I'm Bejar, Applications Specialist here at Chromaline. Now that you've seen how the diazo is mixed into the emulsion, the next step is to actually coat a screen. What you have to have is a clean screen. Get it completely degreased, ready to go, and nice and dry. Then you need a coating trough, or scoop coater as they're known in the US. This particular coating trough actually has 2 edges, a dull edge and a sharp edge. What we mostly use is the dull edge, because that puts a lot of emulsion onto the screen quickly. And being in production, you're always in a hurry. Now this emulsion's been properly sensitized and ready to go. What you want to do is just pour a little bit of emulsion in. And set this down. Put the cap on. This emulsion is now ready to coat on the screen. Let's go over to the coating rack. Okay, that's in nice and tight. The next really important thing is your posture. If you don't do this correctly and coating screens all day long, you're going to be way too tired. The best thing is use your whole body when you coat a screen. Let me show you what I'm talking about. You got your scoop coater. You want to hold onto this nice and tight. You don't want to have a real loose hold on it, or it will fall out of your hands. Hold on to it tight. Keep your arms close to your body. Bend your knees. Put the coater against the screen. Tip it forward. And just stand up in a nice slow motion. You get towards the end. Stop. Continue to scoop. That's one side. The next step is to turn it around. Now we at Chromaline don't care how you coat your screen as long as your last pass is always on the squeegee side. And the reason you want to do that is because the scoop coater pushes the emulsion through the screen. That's important. So that's one coat. I'm going to put one more on. Again, my knees are bent, arms are close to my body. And pull up. Now that would be known as a 1-in-1 coating. Some places will do 1 and 2. I'll do another one. That'd be known as a 1 and 2 coating. Coating. As you can see, I have quite a bit of emulsion on this side. The scoop coater has pushed the emulsion through the mesh to the print side. Now, the important thing is that this be dried squeegee side up in your drying cabinet. That's all there is to it. Thank you.
Okay, you can see the next slide here is about light sources. And you can notice the 5 or 6 different types there. These lights give off very little ultraviolet light, which is what makes the emulsion expose. So using these kind of light sources will take a lot of time and normally and usually will not give you a very good exposing. Moving into this slide here, the acceptable light sources are more like a metal halide, a mercury vapor, fluorescent, and I've even had a lot of people use the sun on a very bright day to expose their screens because all the UV light is produced from the sun. Really, the most important thing here is to make sure you do have a vacuum type exposure unit so that your stencil is right against your film positive with no chance of light scattering between the two and giving you a jagged edge.
What you're looking at here is the exposure calculator. If you've never seen one, this is what it is. And you'll see that there's on the left, underneath the area A, there's kind of a grayscale. And then what that does is help calculate your exposure time. Whatever the exposure time you normally use, you would double that and then apply this grayscale, and that will determine your right exposure time.
Now, we have a lot of people ask about, well, how long should I expose a screen? Well, it's really kind of a loaded question based off what kind of exposure unit you're using, how old your lamps are, and what kind of emulsion you use, ProCap, how thick your ProCap was, what the thickness of your stencil was. So using an exposure calculator like this, if I take an estimated guess that I've got a 5-minute exposure time, what I'll do is I'll double that and start with 10 minutes using this calculator and expose it for 10 minutes. And then when I go to the washout, I can look at this chart here, and the one in the middle, the 0.5, is the one that washes out the best and gives you the best resolution. Then I just take that 10 minutes times it by 0.5, and 5 minutes would be my ultimate exposure time. We do recommend that over the period of time of a year that you do use an exposure calculator, every so often to make sure your exposure times are correct, because different mesh counts and white mesh, yellow mesh all have variables that take different times to expose.
Hi, I'm Mick Orr, Application Specialist at Chromaline. Today I'd like to talk to you about one of the most important tools you can have in your screen making area, and that is the Chromaline Exposure Calculator. Let me put it on a light table so you can see a little bit better. Now this is just a piece of film, not much to it, except it's got very precise lines, very precise dark areas. If you notice, it's actually in 3 areas, area A, B, and C. The most important area is actually area A. This area is going to determine what your proper exposure is. Also, if you notice, we have two sets of targets. And these targets are designed for mesh counts. Also, in the middle, we have these numbers, 1.0, 0.7, 0.5, 0.33, and 0.25. If you notice, it gets from light to dark. It's actually blocking more UV as it gets down farther. The more UV it stops, the shorter the exposure will be. And the more it goes up, the more exposure. So what you're actually ending up with is with one exposure, you get 5 exposures at the same time. This is going to speed things up for you. It's also going to determine what your proper exposure is. What you want to aim for is one of these targets. So first you have to start out with what's known as a guess, an educated guess. For example, say you think that your exposure is going to be, say, 1 minute. Whatever your guess is, you double it. So that 1 minute is now 2-minute exposure. So you double it to 2 minutes, put it on your exposure unit, obviously on your screen, put an exposure unit and expose it. Once it's exposed, take this off and go into the washout sink and wash it out. And these areas will develop in different levels. One may be overexposed, one may be way underexposed. But once it's all developed out, you dry it, and now you can check here. Whichever area looks best, you check the number next to it, multiply it by that number, and that's your proper exposure. That's really all there is to it. Now, once you get all that done, the next important thing to look at is area B and C. These areas are for resolution, to see if you can actually hold these areas with the mesh count you've got. That's really all there is to it. It may seem simple, but the fact is this little tool is a very, very powerful one. If you use it properly, guaranteed you'll have good stencils. Okay, now that I showed you how it works, let's actually do it. First I got to turn this light off because I am working with a light sensitive product. I got my screen there. And I'm going to tape my calculator onto the screen. Now, the important thing is, on this there are two sides, the emulsion side and the film side. If you're ever in doubt, this little piece of film never touches the screen. So I'm going to go and tape it onto the screen, just like that. Now it's ready to be exposed. Let's go to the exposure unit. All right, here we go. I'm going to put it in my exposure unit. Get it all set. Punch in a time. Now remember, we were just guessing on time. Let's just pick a minute. Remember I said you double whatever your guess is. So I say it's going to be a 1 minute exposure. Let's make it 2. That's going to be 2 minutes. And I'll draw a vacuum. Pop it open. Remove the positive. I'm going to take this into the washout area now. All right, now I'm going to wash this out. Now I want you to remember, this is a calculator. Parts of this screen are going to look bad and parts are going to look good. That's okay. It's a calculator. It's just helping you determine your proper exposure. Now remember, area A is the one I'm really concerned with. B and C, they're secondary. Okay, I don't know if you can notice this, but look down here. See how these lines, they literally fall right off the screen. But up here, they're holding. Obviously, that's underexposed. This may or may not be overexposed, it depends. What you got to do is dry the screen and really look at it. But I'm going to wash it out a little bit more. Now you can examine a little closer. You can see now this one's starting to fall apart. Obviously that's underexposed. Here, even here, it's a little bit underexposed, but it gets better and better. Look at this one. Nice and sharp. That's the way it's supposed to be. So far, this is looking like the right exposure, but really the best way to tell is to dry your screen and examine it under a microscope, or at least with a loupe, to see how sharp those lines are. Let's just say, for example, this is the right one. Well, remember I guessed 1 minute? We doubled it to 2. Well, it looks like 2 minutes is probably the right one. But say this one had looked the best. 2 minutes times 0.5 is 1 minute. That's how you use these. These are all multipliers. That's the whole idea. This is your tool. This is your calculator. This is telling you what your proper exposure is on this mesh with this film. That's all there is to it. If you do this on every mesh, on everything you change around, say you did different light source, different mesh count, different mesh color, different film, you should use a calculator because it's going to help you save time. You get better stencils. It's a tool, and it really does work.
What you're looking at here is a screen that's been properly exposed and one that was not properly exposed. Again, the exposure calculator will help determine your right exposure time. One of the things that's also very important when you coat with direct emulsion is you want to make sure that your screen is completely dry. The emulsion is completely dry. If the emulsion feels dry to the touch, doesn't mean that it is. Make sure that you have plenty of air movement so that you can evaporate the moisture. If the emulsion or even a capillary film, ProCap film, has moisture, it will not expose correctly. And this will be the result of improper exposure.
So what we're saying here is that you're in the process of exposing, you expose your screen, you're washing it out, and the emulsion tends to start falling out in big chunks and pieces, starts going away, which is a saying your screen has been underexposed. Now, opposite of that would be if I can't get anything to start falling out and all my lines are closed in, then we've got a time that's been too long. So that's why we are really pushing that you need to use exposure calculator, get your times correct, and it will be a lot quicker and easier for you to produce a screen.
The goal here is to get to the proper exposure. With the high resolution detail customers are looking for today, you want to make sure that you did choose the right mesh. You are using the high output lamp for exposure unit, and that your stencil is completely exposed correctly.
Yeah, so really on here, when we talk about mesh counts and you see this person using a light loupe to look at the stencil and how the emulsion was exposed, again, if by using the right mesh with the right artwork, it's going to produce the right, the right print you're trying to get on the end use on your shirt. So these things that we've talked about, all these steps from the start, getting your exact mesh correct at first, using the right stencil, make sure your artwork is correct and exposure time is correct, will make this whole process a lot easier and make you want to go out and produce more screens and print more shirts. So that kind of goes over the things we were looking to talk about on this pre-press mesh and stencil. If you do have any other questions or would like to talk to us directly, you can give me a call here at Regional Supply at 801-262-6451 or jump on our website and ask questions that way. We really do appreciate you attending, and thanks again.